We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by Prize Picks. Wild Card Weekend. It's the big show. What's up, everybody? I've done that once all year. Forgot to unmute myself, and it had to be in the playoffs. We're losing our almost perfect record. But how's everyone doing? How was everyone's Saturday slate? The Saturday only slate. The Chicago Bears coming back from the dead yet again to move on in the playoffs. How we doing, friends? How we doing? Playoff DFS got to be some of the best slates of the entire year. Am I right? Historically, some of our most profitable slates of the entire year. If you're paying attention to late swap, if you're paying attention to some of the more game theory centric type of strategy this time of the year, it can be a really plus EV time to get some extra action down. Hopefully, you guys had a really good start. I'm playing a little bit more this year of the Saturday Sunday only stuff, but I did want to at least run this poll to make sure that we're doing the right content, right? So for next week, I know kind of what you guys are focused on as well. So what slate do you guys prefer in the playoffs? Is it the 6 game slate, kind of like the max leverage, max late swap type of slate? Is it the Saturday, Sunday only slates, the bigger prize pools, all of that? Or are you just going straight showdown slates for the postseason? Curious what you guys think. This is what I care the most about. Probably should have ran this poll last week as well, versus just doing the Saturday or the Sunday only show. But curious what you guys think. Exclamation point vote, space the number in order to place your vote. What slate do you guys prefer to play in the playoffs? Maybe it's all of them, but if you had to choose one, what are we thinking here, friends? Which slate do you guys like playing? Bunch of people in the chat here yet again. Wayne Casey, what's up, my man? Catcher's in here. What's up, guys? Joe Milk's in here. How we doing? Need that 24/7. Cooks or Barkley? We'll get there, my man. We will get there. Renegade Noel, what's up, man? How's it going? Hardcore King's in here. Johnny Max in here. What's up, guys? CZW, what's up, man? D Mints, how's it going, bro? Steph's in here. First time here from Montreal, Canada. Thanks for the season. Hey, man, appreciate you being with us. Love it. I always have a soft spot for my Canadians. Lived in Canada for like 3 years of my life after high school, man. So I can always appreciate the Canadian people in the chat. IMAX, what's up, man? How's it going? Shit the blood bed played 4 lineups straight busted. Amen. We've all been there. We've all been there. Larger player pools for D Mints. That's kind of where I'm at. I think that like we mostly just focused on the 6 game slate when it was the larger prize pools, but I do think those are fun as well. There's a little bit more strategy to it. And I don't know why I said, well, I guess if we're looking purely at the entire weekend, right? Um, I think that it's one of those things where the 2 game slates, there's definitely a little bit more volatility. But if you just wanted to play the full 6 game slate, there's a lot more opportunities for late swap. So I get that. Maybe the answer is both. But yeah, the 6 game slate, this is kind of how I'm going to decide what to do next week, I think, too. So if you guys want to see more of the 6 gamer stuff, we could do that next week. Maybe try and bleed in some of the Sunday, Saturday only stuff as well to try and get the best of both worlds. That's what I'm thinking about for next week. Anyways, I digress. Thanks for the quick poll there. I'll keep that in mind for next week. And let's get this though, like we always do. And who will be today's highest owned player? Sunday only slate on DraftKings. Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Parker Washington, AJ Brown, James Cook, Travis Etienne. Who's gonna be the highest owned player today on Sunday? What do you guys think? Highest owned player today on Sunday. We are going to go position by position, build the lineup at the end for DraftKings, all that good stuff. Curious who you think is going to be the highest owned player today on this 3 game slate. I'm going to refer to these games as kind of like in order as well. So game number 1, we got Buffalo, Jacksonville. Game number 2, we got San Francisco, Philadelphia. Game number 3, LA Chargers, New England Patriots. The order does definitely matter, especially if you plan on being around to do some late swap. Who's going to be the highest owned player today, though, friends? Who do you think? Highest owned player today. Is it Saquon Barkley? Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley leading the way. We'll get deeper into the running back position as we kind of progress through the polls. I'm just curious who you guys think is going to be the highest owned. Highest owned player. I personally, even though he's 8,500, you have all of the money in the world to spend. I think Christian McCaffrey will be the highest owned player today. I do think that this first game, it's kind of like the opposite of I like on these type of slates. I like when almost all the chalk is at the end versus at the beginning. So we have the highest total game by a large margin as game number one. So Buffalo and Jacksonville. Um, the problem is there's a lot of different directions that we can stack that game. So I think the main approach that I'm gonna have on today's slate is going to be a complete overstack of game number one and just hope for the best and hope that things aren't great the rest of the way. Or I'm mostly gonna fade game number one and hope that it ends up being so spread out that we don't end up getting like a slate breaking performance from one player in that game, if that makes sense. And then kind of correlating the rest of the way through 49ers Eagles, which I think there's a lot of opportunity. And then Patriots Chargers, mostly going to be late swap options in Patriot Charger for me, but there's definitely some plays that make some sense there. We'll get there. Good call last week with the Broncos defense. Yeah, that one wasn't too scientific for sure, but nice to see them get there. Week 18, definitely one of my least favorite weeks of the entire year for tournaments. So hopefully you guys took my advice and scaled back a little bit if you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable, just in time to give it all back in the wild card round. Yeah, we're split pretty evenly on Saquon versus CMC. I think that it is close, but if I had to give you guys one highest owned player, I think it is Saquon, or I think it is CMC rather. I think let's move to quarterback though, because this is kind of what I'm talking about. So top quarterback play, all of them are here. Game number one, we got Trevor Lawrence and Josh Allen. Game number two, we got Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy. Game number three, we have Justin Herbert and Drake May. Who do you think is the best play, price considered, on that list? Is it just jamming in one of the quarterbacks from game number one? I do think both of those guys are going to come in probably as the highest owned. My ownership order is probably going to be Josh Allen. I think Jalen Hurts and Trevor Lawrence will be pretty close. But I will say, I think T Law probably edges him out. I think the leverage is probably, if you feel okay about Brock Purdy, that's probably the lowest owned option. And then Drake May and Justin Herbert, probably around that 10% mark. Relatively flat. What do you guys think about top play, ownership considered, price considered, all that stuff? Who are we forcing into our lineups on this Sunday slate? Johnny Mack did pretty well in DK last week. Let's go. It takes a little bit more work, right? You got to figure out a lot of different dynamics at play on week 18. Your yearly reminder: do not play in a fantasy league where the week 18 championship is going to decide your fate. For the love of God. Josh Allen leading the way as best quarterback play so far. Interesting. Yeah, the Josh Allen stuff, obviously, he's definitely the highest raw points player. I'm just like trying to piece together, like, is he the top option for this type of slate? Because if you are going to stack him up, is a little bit more difficult in some ways. We know that he's going to run a little bit more in the playoffs, which is good. I would say from an efficiency standpoint, this is one of these ones where I don't know if they necessarily have to throw it a ton in this game. I think that the strength is going to be the run game. So I really like James Cook. Obviously, the rushing that they get from Allen in general is really good. They just don't have a really strong group of pass catchers, as we know, right? It's one of these situations, I think, that makes this matchup really interesting. I think if we were gonna choose one quarterback from like a point per dollar standpoint, I think that there is an argument for Trevor Lawrence to save 900 in this spot. The problem with that is you kind of want to run the ball against the Bills. So it's kind of this weird dynamic where the pieces don't fit together too seamlessly in this game. I think that there's a good chance that Josh Allen ends up getting most of his fantasy production on the ground in this spot. The Jags are also below average, at least, in rushing points allowed to quarterbacks. And they're kind of middle of the pack in terms of their pressure rate as well. So while I agree that there could be some points in this game, I do think that it's going to be relatively spread out. If I'm just looking at this game in general, we'll get to the positions. I think some of the ones that are the hardest to get away from, I do really like James Cook. Like I said, at 7,400, you do have almost all the money in the world to spend. We kind of see that with these playoff slates. They end up being a little bit looser. So if you wanted to anchor your roster starting with James Cook, I don't think that's the worst idea. From a defense perspective, I don't think that I would really ever play a defense in game number one. I know that's kind of like a blanket statement, but I really want to be able to use late swap at the deep defense position in particular. So if you wanted to take a shot on one player in this game, I think James Cook is totally fine. I think Travis Etienne is totally fine. I think that you kind of have to pick. I think you have to go really heavy or really light on this game. That's like my official take on this game in general. We'll get to some of the individual plays, but I don't necessarily like going in with a quarterback in this game. If you wanted to roll out like a naked Josh Allen, I can see the argument for something like that. Trevor Lawrence probably fits better in the onslaught type of builds. I don't know if he's going to continue this crazy pace that he's on from like a rushing touchdown perspective, but who knows? Who knows? Interesting to see that we got a couple votes for Drake May and Brock Purdy. That's kind of interesting. One vote for Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts might be one of my favorite plays on this entire slate, but we'll get to that. Let's keep moving through the positions. Let's go to running back next. Top running back play, price considered. We got Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, James Cook, Travis Etienne, Ramondre Stevenson, Travion Henderson, Kamani Vidal. Hampton is questionable, so that does kind of flip this on its head a little bit. It does look like Hampton is going to attempt to play. If you guys hear any more news as we're progressing through this morning, that would be very, very valuable. As of right now, I'm kind of playing this as if he's going to be in, and that obviously throws a little bit more shade to the Kamani Vidal play. But at 4,700, if you were to capture that entire role in game number 3, I'm not ruling out kind of leaving the light on for some Kamani Vidal shares in like a late swap scenario. Maybe we get Amari and Hampton is not that healthy, even if he does play. You might get some decent leverage there. You will get some decent leverage there, but the ceiling might be higher than people realize if Hampton is not at full strength or for some reason gets scratched late in this game, right? So I'm going to leave them in there. But outside of that, best running back play, price considered. What do you guys think? Best running back play. We probably didn't talk a ton about Travis Etienne yet in game number 1. It does feel like a pretty safe pick to score. No one's given up more rushing touchdowns than Buffalo this year, so that's one of the ones that I had in the short form video, if you saw that for the picks for today. So just, I guess, to quickly go over some of the ones that I did really like. I did take Travis Etienne to score a touchdown. I also took an over on Jalen Hurts, correlating that with a Devonta Smith over as well. And I'm not big on George Kittle, which we'll get to in a second. And I do think that Ladd McConkey is probably one of my favorite wide receivers in that Chargers-Patriots game, believe it or not. So we'll talk about that as well. Really good matchup for McConkey in the slot against the Patriots, but we will get there. Running back-wise, Travis Etienne, outside of just scoring touchdowns, even if we get Tootin, I don't think he's going to be like in a situation where they give him a massive amount of touches in a game that they obviously need to basically be very productive on the ground to have a chance. I think the Jaguars are going to lean pretty heavily into Travis Etienne in this one. Obviously, he closed the season in a pretty solid situation, but it's really just the matchup. Running backs have just absolutely destroyed Buffalo, and the efficiency is really what we're getting from them as well in terms of their efficiency allowed to this position. A lot of big plays. A lot of big plays. So you guys like Travis Etienne. I'm with you guys on that. We talked about James Cook a lot. McCaffrey is the interesting one, right? Because I think if we're going to look at this, we could go two ways, basically. And I feel like we've had this a couple times. So if they end up playing the type of game that I think that there's going to be. They're not going to be that effective running the ball, but they are going to be forced into kind of a lot of dump offs. So I think there's a chance where McCaffrey ends up being a really big part of this game through the air, maybe even more than normal. I do think that the Eagles in general are going to have a lot of success here on defense. But I do think that there is still a chance for McCaffrey to get there in multiple ways. And if Kittle isn't as healthy, that obviously doesn't help in the run game. But again, if he's not as healthy, I guess all paths lead to Christian McCaffrey having a huge game through the air, in my opinion. So he's obviously kind of carried this team all year, regardless of the injuries that they've been having. I think that in terms of floor, he's definitely like the highest on the entire slate. It's an interesting one, though. The Jalen Carter factor also is kind of a big part of this, too. So the Eagles getting him back, really big. They've been a lot better against the run with him on the field. So I think we got to kind of look at that part of it as well. Cook matchup, less than ideal with high ownership. I think that game in general is a little bit tricky, right? We could see some interesting touchdowns, I think, in that game. So if you wanted to take a shot, taking a shot on something at low ownership, I guess would make sense. But I think that the points could be relatively spread out, which is what I'm worried about. Right? The Ramondre Stevenson versus Travion Henderson is kind of interesting as well. Obviously, I think most rosters are probably going to try and jam in all three of the running backs, right? You can very easily build Saquon, McCaffrey, James Cook lineups. I think that the Ramondre and Travion stuff is kind of interesting just because Ramondre, obviously, he ended the season in a crazy way, but being used more in the passing game than I realized, also still being used at the goal line. Travion ends up kind of getting everything in between, which isn't necessarily ideal. I'll give it to him. He's been great over the last little while. So if we end up basically seeing ownership split between those guys, it is kind of one of those ones where I think probably late swap only for me. But I do think that Ramondre in particular is somewhat interesting. We'll probably get more touches from Travion, but we'll get higher leverage touches from Stevenson. So maybe the answer is neither, but I could see one of those guys being a usable player at their salary range for sure. Lane Johnson also could play in this game, so the Saquon stuff is kind of interesting, even though he was relatively disappointing this year overall. It is one of those ones where I think that the matchup is still okay for Saquon, even though he's not being used kind of as much of a pass catcher. I think that still getting Saquon in there, this could be a really nice spot for him. San Francisco in particular is a little bit more susceptible to running backs in the passing game, but just decimated by injury, I think really good spot for Saquon. I like the passing game a little bit more though for the Eagles in this spot personally. So part of the reason is they have one of the worst pressure rates in the entire playoffs. Also, they've allowed the third highest completion rate in the NFL over their last 10 games. Hurts low key has absolutely destroyed soft matchups like this all season. No sound. Is that true? No. Give it a quick refresh. Am I not close enough to the mic? Test 1, 2, test. Refresh if sound is out. My guess is that would do it. I don't think this has anything to do with me because there is something else. Audio is good for, yeah. So if it's good for some of you and not good for others, just give it a refresh. Sorry about that, guys. YouTube still has its issues sometimes with the live streams. Refresh the sound, just did it. Cool. Okay. Just to recap on that, if you missed the last minute or so, I do really like the Saquon stuff, but if I had to choose one path of this Eagles and 49ers game, I do really like the passing game for the Eagles. So looking at this in terms of San Francisco, obviously the injuries, all of that, but they've also had one of the worst pressure rates in all of the playoffs remaining, and they've allowed the third highest completion rate in the NFL over their last 10 games. So I kind of think back to some of the soft matchups that Hurts has had this year, like the Commanders, stuff like that. He's basically just destroyed matchups like this all season. I really like Devonta Smith, and I haven't heard a lot of people talking about Devonta Smith, but the 49ers are one of the worst teams in the NFL at defending opposing wide receiver twos, and they just can't defend the slot overall, which Smith has actually run over 50% of his routes in the slot this year. So he does have a nice matchup advantage overall. So I kind of like Devonta Smith, it sounds like, more than most people. And then I think there's multiple ways that obviously Hurts can get there. You get multiple tush pushes. You're hoping that he does at least something through the air. But if he does get in the end zone on the ground, really just elevates that ceiling and that floor overall and kind of can give you a nice little correlation there. Especially when a lot of the ownership at wide receiver, I think, is going to go to some of these Jacksonville guys. We'll get there in a second. But A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith doubles very much in play for me. Let's go to wide receiver. See if you guys agree with me. Top non-elite wide receiver play. I'm just going to keep all the wide receivers in here, so A.J. Brown is on it as well. A.J. Brown, Jacoby Myers, Parker Washington, Khalil Shakir, Devonta Smith, Stephon Diggs, or other. What do we like here at wide receiver? I made my take, I guess, for the passing game for the Eagles. You guys agree? '49ers still giving up to wide receiver ones as well, not just wide receiver twos, even though they've gotten absolutely crushed by them. Really strong setup for both of these guys. Bottom three at points allowed to the slot. Lad McConkey. I like that call. I like that call. Another team that really struggles against slot receivers. New England. Bottom five defense against slot receivers. The problem there is Keenan Allen's still kind of taking some of that target share away, which isn't ideal. And the offensive line injuries, all of that. McConkey has really struggled to find a ceiling since that injury. Really, just the passing game in general has struggled to find a ceiling. But there is some signal here into the slot where I think McConkey could absolutely eat. So he's one of those ones where I don't think a lot of people are talking about him, but he's kind of interesting as like a leverage option if you needed some leverage in game number 3. What else we got here? Yeah, in the chat, you were talking about Quentin Johnson. I would imagine Christian Gonzalez is going to be on him probably more than anyone else. Yeah. Not ideal. Like Diggs, too, he's got a high ceiling. Yeah, the volume is going to be relatively safe for Diggs. Agree with you there. I actually think that the doubles are somewhat interesting for Drake May if you have some of that PMR remaining. I would say that like Diggs in particular was making me a little bit nervous towards the beginning of the year, but since then, obviously the target share, the catch rate, he's shown a little bit more ceiling in general, and obviously as far as he gets like removed from that ACL injury, the better. But yeah, I think that in terms of him, basically one of the better matchups we've seen this year for him is against a lot of these like too high safety coverages. We get see Diggs kind of eat underneath. He's got like almost a 30% target share against those type of looks. So we should see a lot of Diggs today or tomorrow. Today. Tomorrow we got Steelers, Texans. Sometimes I forget that they don't add. I wish they would at least add the Monday Night Football game to that slate. This slate, we get a little bit more late swap equity there. But yes, the night game tonight. Chargers D, nothing to sneeze at. That's fair. And I think there's still like there's arguments that like the Patriots had one of the easiest schedules in the entire league coming into this game. I got that. I feel you there. Parker Washington. Yeah, the Parker Washington stuff is interesting. He obviously had an amazing season. We kind of thought that Jacoby Myers was going to take over like that number one role here for a while. Obviously, Brian Thomas Jr., one of the biggest disappointments. We get a lot of stuff in the slot for Washington. Obviously, the chemistry that he's had with Trevor Lawrence has been very strong. I would say that in this matchup in particular, Buffalo's been pretty good at defending the interior overall. So that would be my concern. That would be my concern in general. Shout out Family Man. What's up, buddy? Welcome back to being a member. My concern is just the matchup. but he is going to get the volume. So volume is king. Volume is king. The Jacoby Myers stuff is also kind of interesting because he's mostly playing on the outside when all of these receivers are out there together. And Buffalo is one of the best teams in the league at defending the outside. So I guess, a little bit nervous to see Jacoby, Parker Washington, these Jacksonville guys be as chalky as they are, because I get that the price makes sense, the volume makes sense, but it's like a horrible matchup overall. Am I the only one that's like kind of concerned by that? Like Brian Thomas Jr., he's going to get some of the like the deep targets. He still has some touchdown ability, all of that. But yeah, I don't know. Am I the only one that's a little bit nervous about these wide receivers? Am I crazy? Remember all the money we won with Diggs? I sure do. Diggs is one of my favorite players of all time from a fantasy perspective. Yeah, he's been great. I'm nervous about. I mean, maybe I could. I've been wrong before. Trust me, I could be wrong. My general inkling on these type of slates is when the chalky wide receivers are in game number one. They make really good fades, and it just so happens that we have a really good matchup here to take advantage of that. So if I was to choose one route on the Jacksonville side, I think I like Travis Etienne a little bit more than most. I think that most of the ownership is going to go towards Cook, McCaffrey, Saquon, but I like the idea of getting in some Travis Etienne if you're going to pick just one piece of that game on the Jacksonville side. I've already said that I'm not going to force in the quarterbacks. I think that you can make an argument for like a naked Josh Allen, maybe even a naked Trevor Lawrence. Um, if you wanted to do like a skinny stack, Lawrence to Brenton Strange, I think that could make some sense. But in general, I'm a little bit worried about this matchup for the Jacksonville passing game and these receivers. It just doesn't fit together very well because it's exactly what this Buffalo defense does a really good job at defending. So while I can have a little bit of concern with this game, I guess the problem is Vegas doesn't have many concerns at all, right? So when we're looking at this game, it has by far the highest total. It has like a lot of pieces that are projecting really well. So it's hard to completely like walk through like what a fade would look like of this game, but I do think it's at least something that we could consider. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Speaking of tight end, top tight end play today. Price considered: Brenton Strange, Dalton Kincaid, Dallas Goedert, George Kittle, or other. I'm personally a little bit nervous that George Kittle is still a little bit injured. Curious what you guys think at tight end. Showdown slate I won was either 200. Yeah, I definitely didn't win 200K. I wish. Definitely had a big Diggs game, big showdown slate with Diggs. I think it was versus the Steelers, like 2020, 2021. Yeah, it's like a 50K hit, which was amazing. The Stephon Diggs like 3 touchdown game. Yep. Also had Diggs on the Minneapolis Miracle, which was a big swing. Dalton Kincaid getting some love at tight end. Interesting. Okay, fair. Hunter Henry. Yeah, I could see that. Not on this list, but could have added him. The Hunter Henry price point is a little bit tough, but I could get there. Big Lou, thanks for subscribing, my man. Welcome in. Dallas Goddard was one that I kind of wanted to double check too, because I do, like I said, really like the Devonta Smith stuff. But Dallas Goddard, basically for just looking at the tight ends in that game, terrible matchup for George Kittle. Philly has been like basically the best team in the NFL at defending tight ends. And like I said, I don't think that George Kittle is especially healthy. But I do think that it's actually on the other side a pretty good matchup for Goddard, obviously, since the Fred Warner injury. The 49ers have just been kind of getting shredded by tight ends. They're not like the absolute stone worst in the league, but it is a positive matchup for Dallas Goedert. So I actually don't even mind something kind of unique with like a double with Jalen Hurts, but um, maybe you leave off AJ Brown just for a little bit of differentiation there. I don't think I'll be playing Hurts with Saquon, but again, that's another way that you can kind of build a unique Hurts stack, I suppose. The matchup would promote that as well. Dawson Knox, I could see it. Strange is contrarian at best. Like I said, I'm a little bit nervous with Jacksonville in general outside of ETN. I think the path is pretty clear for, at least from a matchup perspective, him being one of the best plays in that game. Dallas Goedert getting some love. Dalton Kincaid, yeah, I think if you wanted to stack one guy with Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid certainly makes some sense. The problem with like Kincaid versus Shakir is they kind of play like a similar role. So, like from an ownership perspective, I think Kittle, Kincaid, those would be like the highest owned guys. If you want to get some leverage off of Kincaid, maybe you try and figure out a way to get Shakir in there. But I don't love that idea either. Let's get to the most fun pull, and then we'll build a lineup. If we are to stack one game today, what is it? Buffalo at Jacksonville, San Francisco at Philly, LA Chargers at New England Patriots. Who are we stacking up? What are we stacking up? Which game is it? I do think that's generally one of the better approaches you can make on these shorter slates is going overboard on one game. What do we think here, friends? Did I talk you guys into some Hurt stacks? I just have this feeling that Philly is going to absolutely boat race San Francisco. Am I on an island there? Buffalo, Jacksonville, significantly higher total, to be fair. And that definitely matters. Like, if we're just looking at teams that were projected to score the most points this week, we got 6 games. 2 of the top 3, Jacksonville and Buffalo. 51.5 point total right now. This Philly game, 44.5. This Patriots game, 45.5. So there is a big difference there in Vegas total, to be fair. San Francisco's so beat up coming out. Yeah, I agree. Yep. Sounds like we're in alignment on Philly rolling today. Philly rolls. Okay, so let's do this. Let's just go ahead and jump into this roster build then. So this is kind of the shell that I would approach this as my non-negotiables if we were going with a Hurts stack. So I would want Hurts. I personally would want Devonta Smith for sure. I would start there. I would say that if we are going to be building something out, I like to have a defensive slot available. I do think that the Chargers are probably just fine at that price point at 2,200. We could leave them in there, or we could just put Patriots in there. But in general, I think the cheapest defense on these slates tends to be kind of the direction that I like to go. Um, and I think in general, that's the one that'd probably be my number one defense play of the week. So I would start there with that shell. And then I want to find at least one piece in game number one that I feel really good about. And I think what we've identified here is if we're going to be fading the quarterbacks and going to be fading the passing game for Jacksonville, I really like the idea of getting Travis Etienne on this roster personally. I think that most rosters, it's very easy to get at least 2 of Saquon, McCaffrey, James Cook. I think for me, of those 4 guys, if we include ETN, I think McCaffrey is the other one and the other side of this game that I would really want to focus on. So this would be my core of my non-negotiables for a Hurts team. I think we need to find at least one more piece that we really like for Hurts. So I'm open to going with just the classic AJ Brown, Devontae Smith double. We could add in Dallas Goedert. There's a bunch of different directions we could go. What do you guys think? I don't love Saquon with Hurts. I'll just throw that out there. I don't love Saquon with Hurts. Thinking about the way that Hurts gets there, right? It could be some tush push, but we are still going to need at least a little bit through the air. So I think that you can make an argument for just the A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith double. That correlates very well. Maybe Dallas Goedert. I think that we're on the same page with that in the chat. If we're not playing Strange, if we're not playing Kincaid, getting in Dallas Goedert, I think makes a lot of sense. So we get the Hurts, Smith, Goddard, bring back with CMC. And we still have a decent amount to work with here at wide receiver. Still have a decent amount. Do we want to continue to stack up San Francisco, Philly, or do we want to find some pieces of this Chargers and New England game that we like? I don't hate the idea of trying to get in one of, maybe both, but I think one of like Diggs, Kayshon Boutte, I think is somewhat interesting. The matchup's pretty strong there. They've been getting kind of beat deep through the middle, if that makes sense. And that's kind of the routes that we get from Kayshon Boutte typically. So I think that's somewhat interesting. Probably no Hunter Henry. We could talk through what a Keenan Allen team looks like. I think he's looking a little bit under-owned right now as well. Ramondre Stevenson is someone interesting if we wanted to get him in. Ramondre Stevenson versus Travion Henderson, I think, is kind of an interesting question that we have to answer right now. In that flex spot, Ramondre Stevenson versus Travion is somewhat interesting, right? Because that's where a lot of the production has come. We have like kind of seen Ramondre in that resurgence. Travion Henderson had some big parts of the year. Yeah, it feels more of like a Gibbs Montgomery situation than it has before. Feels like the matchup is kind of neutral, but like they've given up big plays through the air. They've given up big plays on the ground as well. So I think that's a little bit interesting. It seems somewhat interchangeable to me which running back we go with. What do you guys like if we were to choose between one? I mean, we could just go with neither as well. We probably have enough room for something like Diggs. We probably could get in like a Lad McConkey. I think he's somewhat interesting. The target share looks pretty good. Obviously, we need touchdowns if we want to get to the top of tournaments. It is a really good matchup for slot receivers. I'm kind of talking myself into some Lad McConkey just because I think most people aren't going to play him. At 5,700, he seems like a decent leverage option with some ceiling. If we did do Boutte, in the spirit of trying to get some upside here, we could do Boutte and Diggs as well. This is kind of what I was picturing in my head. We just fade the running back situation. We try and get some more upside in this game, and we get it through Boutte and Diggs and that mini stack. And then we get a little bit of like McConkey access as well to that game. What do you guys think of this? I don't like the idea of spending all the salary because this might not be as unique of a team as it needs to be. But I do think this is an interesting build. Diggs or McConkey, pick one. I mean, yeah, I think Diggs is the better play. Yeah, it's pretty close between those guys though. In terms of like raw ceiling, like Diggs by a decent margin though. Yeah, he's just more expensive. No love for Jennings. I don't really have a ton of love for. I just don't necessarily think that the San Francisco defense or offense is going to have a ton of success today, outside of just like a ton of volume for CMC. Personally, Gadsden's someone interesting at 3,400 too. He projects really well at not much ownership. But I kind of like the way that this is coming together because I think that if we're just looking at this last game, the highest owned players are going to be Diggs, Henderson, that range. So if we can just kind of go a tier down from that and we kind of make a pivot off of Henderson and we get to like Lad McConkey, like the Henderson versus McConkey, they project very similarly across ownership. You get a little bit more ceiling from Travion, but I like the matchup for McConkey. Booty's not playing. Is that true? That'd be news to me. Questionable with a hamstring injury. Limited session on Thursday. Huh. Do we think he's going to play? Wish we had a little bit more news on that. I'm trying to find something else, see if we can find anything else here on Twitter on that. Are we worried about Keishawn Boutte not playing? A hamstring injury for a guy that I'm trying to get catches downfield seems not ideal. I think the good news is, though, it is game number 3, so you would be able to do some late swapping if needed on that, right? So you'd be able to basically, let's get Diggs in there. Does that get us Vidal in the flex? Not quite. Doesn't quite get us Vidal. But you could move off of McConkey at that point. Yeah, not ideal, though. Added to the injury report on Thursday. Hopefully it's nothing. CMC or Saquon? CMC for me. He played last week with a hamstring, so at least it's not new. He is not playing. Is that fair? Someone tell me where I can find that he's not playing, or is he just very questionable? He's close enough in price to some of these other options where like you could just clean swap in Keenan Allen here, right? Like that's easy enough. We could just throw Keenan Allen in if we need to. So I think that probably would be the pivot. If we end up getting more news on Keishawn Boutte, we can just get Keenan Allen in there. Keenan Allen projects a little bit better anyways, but you'll get some lower ownership on Boutte if he's out there, and if he's not seeing out, just questionable. Yeah, me too. So I'm going to leave Boutte on this roster for now, but you could very easily get someone else like Keenan Allen in there for sure. And I guess this should be said, but I don't have any issue playing a defense on the same team with a lot of other pass catchers. 3-game slate, it doesn't really affect your expectation at all. The defense stuff ends up being relatively random on these type of slates anyway, so not a huge deal. Yep. All right, guys, going a little bit shorter today. Obviously, just 3 games to go through on Sunday. So best of luck on this slate. Next week, gonna throw the idea around of maybe doing a Saturday show just to basically go through the full divisional round slate instead of just one day and one slate of games. Let me know in the comments if you guys would like to see that. But if not, we'll see you next week, and best of luck in the wildcard round. Peace.